From the Ronald Reagan Institute in Washington, D.C., this is Rendezvous with History, a podcast that captures the drama of presidential decision-making. Dr. Anthony Eames sits down with prominent scholars and leading citizens to bring to life what happens in the White House and how it shapes the world.
You and I have a rendezvous with destiny.
Welcome back, Rendezvous with History listeners, and I'm pleased to be joined here today with Janelle Neises, the Entertainment Liaison in the Office of Public Affairs for the Central Intelligence Agency. Janelle, nice to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really excited to talk about our history.
Well, you have a pretty interesting role. Usually when we think of the CIA, we think of secrets. We think of things that we're not allowed to know. And you're on the public side of the house. You actually are one of the few people in the CIA that's allowed to talk about the work of the CIA. So I want to dive in right away to some of the more fascinating and fun parts of your job. And one of those parts is if you have the privilege of getting through the gates at Langley and getting a private tour of the CIA, as you were so kind to give me. There's a wonderful museum there.
It's the greatest museum you'll never see, although you got to see it.
The greatest museum, I can attest, it's the greatest museum you'll never see. And the kind of bounty of artifacts is remarkable. And the stories that they tell are remarkable. And so if you could, I just want you to spotlight a few of those really unique standout exhibits and artifacts of the CIA Museum, what they represent to the agency's history, and its operations, and why is it so central to the DNA of the CIA?
Asking me what my favorite artifacts are is probably the hardest question you're going to ask me today, because it changes. I learn new things about artifacts and dive deeper into them, and then I end up liking them more. But there are a few that stay pretty consistent, and one of them is the exhibit that we have on the Glomar Explorer. So this is also called Project Azorian. And what happens here is a Russian sub sinks to the bottom of the ocean, about 11 and a half Empire State Buildings down. We find it. The Russians can't find it.
This is the peak of the Cold War.
Absolutely.
Right? Okay.
Yeah. So getting this sub, not just what's on it is important, but the sub itself. We are trying to get a better grasp of the technology that the Soviets are using to build their subs so that they're more detectable for us. So getting this is a huge find for the CIA. But we can't just go out there in a U.S. Navy carrier. It's not safe. And then we also have to build something that can pick up a multi-ton sub off the bottom of the ocean floor. And so our engineers start working on ideas at the CIA, but we also work with Howard Hughes. So Howard Hughes, somebody who was very patriotic. He helped with the war effort during World War II, very into kind of pushing the envelope when it comes to technology and engineering, aviation. So he's the perfect cover for us. And he's willing to work with us. He provides us this cover where we are going to go mine the ocean floor for manganese nodules. That's not what we were doing, obviously, but we needed people to not question what was happening.
And no one questions Howard Hughes because he's kind of an eccentric billionaire, Tony Stark, Iron Man type.
Oh, yes. I have all sorts of theories that Marvel definitely thought Agent Carter was Virginia Hall and Howard and Tony Stark are based off of Howard Hughes, for sure. But yeah, so you've got this guy who is willing to kind of go out there and be that cover for us, and he makes complete sense. So much so that actually now interior mining companies start seeing what Howard Hughes is doing, and they think, I'm going to do that too, because it's Howard Hughes, and everything he does seems to make him money. But this disguise, this cover, is what allows us to go get this sub. And on display, we've got some really cool artifacts. We've got the coveralls that the crew actually wore on the Hughes Glomar Explorer ship, which I still don't understand. It's an engineering feat. It's considered one of the greatest engineering marvels of its time. It's a ship that opens up completely and then lowers a capture vessel called Clementine down to the bottom of the ocean to pick up this sub. And one of the things on display is a 3D rendering. I can't tell you about the technology used to get it, but it was key for our engineers to have because we didn't know what the sub looked like after sitting at the bottom of the ocean and deteriorating over time. And so having this allowed our engineers to say, okay, we can't grab it from the top. We need to cradle it almost like a baby. And so that's on display as well. One of the other exhibits that I always like, and it'll never change, is the Argo exhibit. There are quite a few really interesting artifacts with this, but I think the cover, again, is what will really bring people in and get them excited about what CIA can accomplish. As a lot of your listeners probably know, hostages were taken in Tehran. They were held for 444 days, but there were 6 people who were able to get away and hide out, and we wanted to go get them. We tried a lot of ideas, we write things on the board, and sometimes the craziest ideas at the CIA are the ones that actually are going to work.
Yeah, that's both inspiring and also not comforting. But okay, keep going.
But at least, we're methodically ticking off
Exactly.
all the different ways. And so, they decide we're going to go in posing as a film. We're going to go in and location scout. And so one of the things they had to do was find a script that made sense for the terrain. So they found this script, and it had this amazing concept art that showed kind of what the look and feel of the movie would be, but also the amusement park that if the movie took off, they wanted to build. And all of that artwork was actually drawn by Jack Kirby of the Marvel Universe, which, as the mother of an 8-year-old, blows his mind.
So now we have 2 CIA exhibits, and we've referenced Marvel twice. I'm starting to sense a trend here, but keep going on this Argo exhibit, which, of course, you advised on for the movie as well, correct?
Correct. So the CIA's entertainment liaison at the time was working with the production team to make sure that we could help them with accuracy, fact checking, and then we actually let them film in our building, in our lobby, and one of our corridors, and then outside as Tony Mendez is getting into his car.
Which I understand no one actually has that parking spot.
Correct. We tried to tell, when we talk about authenticity and getting things right, we tried to tell the production team, hey, Tony Mendez was important, but he wasn't that important. He would never have been able to park right outside of our headquarters building like that. But they wanted that iconic shot, which we get that's movie magic right there.
As 2 professionals working in Washington, D.C. who deal with the traffic in Washington, D.C., I think you and I have had a few conversations about the unrealistic commute of CIA officers and personnel.
Correct.
Jack Ryan riding his bike from downtown Washington, D.C. in a suit all the way to CIA headquarters, not sweating a bit.
We also advised on that, but the realistic part of that is we do have officers that ride their bikes, but most of them, especially if they're coming further away, are in their gear. They're in their workout gear, and then they go shower in the gym and put their suits on and then go to work. They don't show up perfect and beautiful like John Krasinski did.
The most unbelievable part of that whole Amazon series, clearly,
was him riding his bike and then walking in perfectly.
So back to the Argo conversation. I mean, the CIA really built out this whole back end in case they got checked, right?
Correct.
It was you mentioned the movie art, which was for a theme park, was it?
So the movie script had concept art so that whoever directed the movie kind of had a feel for what it should look like. And then, they kind of were thinking that this movie is going to be so huge that it is going to warrant a Disney-like amusement park. So there's rides and stores. It's a very cool artifact. And right next to it is the business card that has Studio 6, which we named in honor of the 6 people we were going to exfiltrate out of Tehran. So we've got the business cards, we've got the letterhead and the envelopes. I mean, we made sure that this looked legit. There's even a Variety article. We had a reading with actors and invited the press so that there'd be buzz about this movie. That way, if anyone in Tehran questioned what we were doing, there's backfill. There's little pieces of pocket litter that show that this is a legitimate movie that Hollywood is trying to make.
I love the depth. How many folks in Tehran and during the revolution are scouting Variety magazine? Maybe just that one person, but I love the
just
depth.
in case.
Just in case, yeah.
Lives are on the line.
So, we've covered a few of these really fascinating artifacts and exhibits, but what is the process for actually going through and acquiring these artifacts, making sure they're put on display with very specific considerations, given how, and many times, delicate or lethal that they may be. Kind of shed some light on that for me.
One of the things that we used to do at the museum when it first started was, we'd have artifacts coming to us from the officers that use them when they would retire. Most of the items that are on display at CIA headquarters were something that the CIA created or used on a mission. So they're coming in from the inside. But we've become much more forward-leaning in the last few years at the CIA. We really actively collect. So as soon as a mission is completed, the CIA museum team is trying to reach out to the people that were involved in that mission or that moment in history and speak with them. Because sometimes people don't know what might be an interesting artifact. It could be, as simple as a map or a notebook that you circled and wrote information on. And so we want to have that conversation to figure out what they have. But then also, we want to get the history while it's fresh in their heads and not when they retire. And that way we have accurate, memories, we have accurate documentation, so that when we do tell the story, because sometimes it can take 20, 30, 40 years to tell because of classification, we already have everything kind of ready to go. A great example of this is when the U.S. government took out Zawahiri. So this is bin Laden's number 2 during 9/11, number 1 after bin Laden is killed. I was already reaching out to the officer who was involved in that mission before President Biden had made the announcement to the American people that he had been killed by a precision strike. I was down there with a measuring tape and a camera taking photographs because we knew that that's not just an important part of CIA history, that's an important part of U.S. and world history right there. And we want to make sure that we collect it and protect it so that it's there for generations to come.
So it's probably not just you making the decision on what goes in the museum. Who else is involved in that process?
Sure. So obviously you have the museum staff, which I was the former deputy director of for about 5 years. And so we would be that first point of contact. But then we have a committee, actually. It's the CIA's Museum Collection Advisory Committee. We call it the CAC. And it's made up of other professionals, so experts, historians, people who we know have a valued interest in the stories that we tell at CIA. And we take a look at what this item is going to do when it comes to educating our workforce and educating the public about our people and our mission and our history. And so we look to see, do we already have something like this in our collection? We look to see how long is this going to take to be declassified. We usually will take it, even if it's looking like 50, 60 years, because we want to make sure we preserve it and protect it. And then we'll also look to see what we already have in our collection that's on display that this might fit into. So once something comes in, though, and we decide we're going to collect it, we're going to keep it, then we have to figure out if it can go on display. And that's the harder part for an organization like the CIA, where so much of what we do is classified. And so we actually have to work with information review officers, people who are involved in the mission, and figure out, is the artifact itself classified? And if not, it can go on display. But is there enough details about the artifact to actually tell a story? Because everything, the labels, if we're going to do a video to go with it, all of it has to be at the unclassified level. So we have a lot of items, artifacts that are not classified, but they're not ready yet story-wise for the public to be able to see.
So speaking of those stories, as you mentioned, there's the CIA museum that so few in the public actually get a chance to see. I mean, what's the mission of the museum? What is it there for, then?
Our mission at the museum is to inform, instruct, and inspire. And so you can really break that down very easily. Informing is education. We want to educate not only our workforce, because you learn from past successes and failures, and that is why it is in a hallway, as you experienced. It is not a separate room or building.
A nice hallway.
Yeah, a very nice hallway. But we want our workforce to take 10 minutes between meetings and learn something new, stop at a new exhibit, and make that a part of their daily ritual. So it's about educating our workforce, inspiring them. The people who came before them, especially those who lost their lives, are incredibly inspiring. And they're a reminder that it's not just enough to come in and do your best for the American people, but you need to do your best for those who lost their lives serving in the CIA. And then there's our partners. So we do bring in people from the U.S. government, other intelligence community members, foreign liaison, and it's a great way to educate them on how we all work together and how in the past we've done that and how that has created mission success. And that's incredibly important, because then you can build on that by showing them this is what we've accomplished before and this is what we can accomplish together in the future. And then there's the public. So yes, you can't come in. Please don't try. There are, people with guns that protect us at CIA headquarters. But one of the things that we really actively try to do is open our virtual doors to the public. We have a lot of our artifacts on CIA.gov, which is our website. And then we also have an artifact of the week that goes out via social media. And then a series, there's about 40 videos, I believe. It's called The Debrief. And these are usually 2 minutes or less. They're videos that take a quick deep dive into a specific artifact. And they talk about how it was used, why it was created, where it was used. They give you a little bit more of the history than you'd find just on a label. And it gives you the opportunity to actually see it. We have this great camera team at CIA that makes the artifacts look as cool as they deserve to look. And so we do try to get things out. We have publications that you can get for free on CIA.gov as well that take you inside the museum and really show you what the artifacts are there for, which is to tell our history. They're kind of the authentic way into CIA's history. They lived the mission, and now they're there to tell you about it.
Now, one thing you told me in one of our former conversations, or previous conversations, I should say, was the CIA has amongst one of the highest levels of morale among the federal workforce, and it seems that the museum plays a big part of that. So that's something to be congratulated on. Now, I think what we want to do here, though, a little bit, is if you can give us some details on maybe a real-life mission that might sort of dispel the kind of myths about the CIA that's propagated by Hollywood or popular culture. What are we getting wrong? And it's probably cooler in truth, but what are we getting wrong?
I think that it's really easier to explain if I kind of take you inside the mindset of CIA officers. When we watch movies and TV shows, we have something at work that we like to call real, like movie reel. REEL versus real, like reality. And so for us, when we're watching a movie, reading a book, watching a TV show, we always like to kind of keep that in mind. Like, what is the reality? And then what is the movie magic or, the author trying to do here? And I think that there are a lot of good examples of movies that got things really right and got things that were very wrong. But I think the movie Argo and the movie Zero Dark 30 are a great example of two movies that got a lot right. But one of the things they got wrong is, I think, very important to point out. And that's this idea of a one-man show. So in Argo, you see Tony Mendez, right? And he's leading this team and he's got the plan and he goes into Tehran. And it looks like it's just him doing everything. Yeah. And at the CIA, it's never one person. Everything that we do has a whole team behind it, and sometimes even like teams behind that team. And so with Tony, though, what's really interesting is that not only does he have, all these people back at headquarters and possibly elsewhere in the world working this mission, there's another guy that's in Tehran with him, a CIA officer. But when the book was written and the movie was made, Ed Johnson was still undercover. So Ed just came out from cover last year. It's only been about a year. And so this man wasn't just helping. He was actually in Tehran with Tony on this mission. So that's one of the things that you don't get from the movies. And the same with Zero Dark 30. So you've got the Maya character. She is a composite, I think is the best way to describe it, of multiple people who are working on our HVT-1 team. So HVT-1 is high value target number one. And so for the CIA, that was bin Laden. And so there's multiple people working on this team that are putting in insane hours, pulling every thread that they can find that they think is going to lead them to bin Laden. And so you don't see that in the movie. And then behind them, there's also other teams at the CIA. And you've got Director Panetta. Every day, he's not just briefing the DO leadership, which is our operations side, or the analysts in the DA. He's briefing and working with the DS&T, which is our Directorate of Science and Technology, and our Directorate of Support, because everybody in the agency has a role somewhere in this mission. And then pull another layer back, and you're missing all of our partners. So we could not have done that mission without people at NSA, NRO, NGA. I mean, everything that we were able to get from signals and from the sky, photos, video, none of that would have been possible. And so on our end, we get that when you go to a movie or you watch a TV show, you have to emotionally invest in a character. And that's kind of hard to do if there are 72 main characters. But that's more of the reality at CIA. And then I think with those two movies too, you don't get an idea of how intelligence work can often take a while. It can be time consuming, it can span years, and is very methodical and very thought out. And so even though our officers are in these high stakes, dangerous environments, stressful environments, all of that is real, it often has a lot behind it too. A lot of training that gets you ready for that, and then just all of the preparation and the analysis and the work to get ready for that moment. You can't put all that on screen.
Sure. So at one point, we've heard about the importance of CIA engaging with Hollywood for the Argo mission, but there's clearly that's not the case with every bit of engagement you do. Kind of, what is the purpose of CIA's work with Hollywood or the entertainment industry more broadly? There's clearly a mission there. How would you define that?
Hollywood definitely plays a part in how they see the CIA. Same with authors too. People watch a movie or a TV show or read a book, and then all of a sudden they've got more things in their head that they think is real at CIA or what we do or who we are. One of the things that I think that Hollywood and other places get wrong on a pretty regular basis is they refer to people like me, U.S. citizens who work for the CIA, as agents. I'm an officer. I'm not an agent. And so then the question becomes, well, then who are the agents? Well, our case officers find well-placed assets or agents overseas. Those are our spies. So when we're working with movies or TV shows or an author, we'll give them those little details, those moments to be as accurate as possible. And actually that leads to a really great moment where we worked with the Jack Ryan people, with John Krasinski, and we helped them with, some accuracy, some fact checking. They filmed at headquarters in our lobby. And one of the things we told them from the start was, we are officers. We would love it if you could get that in there. Mm-hmm. And we say that all the time, but because for so many, years, people have been referring us as agents, I don't think people want to confuse people and backtrack. But there's this great scene in the first season of Jack Ryan where his girlfriend and they're having dinner and he's talking about what he does. And she says, so you're a spy, you're a CIA agent. And he pauses for just a second and laughs and says, officer. We say officer. The movies always get that wrong. Yeah. And everybody at headquarters was so excited because we felt very represented and it was very accurate. But on the flip side, we also told the Jack Ryan people, we don't really carry guns, right? The majority of the CIA workforce is not issued a weapon unless they are in a war zone or they're part of our protective service, which is essentially like police, our security. And so you've got Jack Ryan shooting at people in big cities all over the world and in the United States. And that's not our reality at CIA.
Well, he's the lone wolf too.
And that's another thing. So a lot of movies, TV, books, they like to paint us as an organization that maybe goes beyond the law or goes rogue all the time. And I can tell you so honestly that we have so many layers of oversight at the CIA, whether it's, Congress and the administration and also lawyers. We have a whole cadre of lawyers, very smart lawyers who keep us in line and make sure that we are doing everything in an ethical way and that we're not doing something quote unquote rogue. So that's a bubble that I think when I burst for people, they're kind of disappointed. They like the idea that we're going to go rogue, but we don't.
Right. There's so many little kids out there who've just been disappointed.
I know. I'm sorry I broke your hearts, children.
You and I have had another conversation in the past about kind of moments in which a movie or a TV show or a kind of pop culture phenomenon, I think we were talking about Alias, Jennifer Gardner.
Yeah.
Impacts recruitment. So is this a big recruitment tool, do you think?
Hollywood especially has an impact on recruitment for sure. And I'm a prime example of that. Like you just mentioned, I was obsessed with Alias, just ridiculous. And I honestly would watch the show and think, I don't speak a lot of languages, but I feel like maybe I could do that. And I grew up in a town of like 6,000 people in the middle of nowhere in the Midwest. And so I had never thought about the CIA. I'd never thought about working for the federal government in general. And so watching, Jennifer Garner playing agent Sydney Bristow, I was very inspired to join the CIA and apply for sure. And there are others like me that were inspired by, whether it was a children's author who wrote something about espionage or other TV shows and movies. And of course, you've got people who are inspired by James Bond and Jason Bourne.
Yep.
So yes, Hollywood definitely depicts us in some ways that are accurate, some ways that are not. And then, honestly, sometimes they make us look a little cooler than we are when it comes to, the room with wall-to-wall screens that you touch and immediately it can tell you what a license plate is from 7,000 miles away. So Alias obviously really inspired me to apply to the CIA, and a lot of other people too that I've spoken with. They were inspired by books and movies. But at the end of the day, it really comes down to sort of this idea of duty, honor, and service. People come to the CIA because they want to serve their country and the mission. We have the coolest mission on the planet. And so I think that when it really comes down to it, we appreciate what Hollywood does to make us look cool. But most of the people who come our way, who are coming from all walks of life, all different parts of the United States, there's one kind of common thread there, and that's that they want to serve their country, and they want to do that at the CIA.
You've lived and breathed this work for quite a while, and it's always kind of fascinating to hear, what's your favorite spy novel? What's your favorite spy movie? Is it because they get the history right, or is it because they get the history wrong that makes it more fantastical?
So being a government employee, I can't endorse one book or movie over another. But what I will say, and your listeners can kind of start looking it up on the side, is I love reading books about the women of the Office of Strategic Services. So the Office of Strategic Services, we call it the OSS. They're our predecessor organization at CIA. They were our intel during World War II for the United States. And there was this cadre of women, just the most impressive women that you'll ever read about, who haven't had their due yet, in my opinion. There needs to be more movies and TV shows about them. Just the fact that they were able to accomplish so many things and, go behind enemy lines or work on propaganda, covert influence campaigns that were incredibly effective. And doing this as a woman at this point in history and what that meant and just the obstacles that they faced, they're so incredibly inspiring. And some of them ended up at the CIA and created the foundation that our current female officers now stand on. And so I would recommend anything that deals with women from OSS, because I just think it'll kind of blow people's minds to know that these women were able to accomplish this during World War II. And then one thing that I really, really think is a great tool if you want to learn more about the CIA is on our website, we actually have the Center for the Studies of Intelligence, and they put out books, articles, different things all the time. And this past year, they put out a book by a man named Tom Ahern, and he is a CIA legend. So Tom wrote a book called Nothing If Not Eventful, which is a nod to his amazing career, but also his infectious sense of humor, because Tom was one of the hostages held during what happened in Tehran. So he was held for 444 days, and he was actually the highest ranking officer in country. And so he was separated, kept in isolation. It was a really rough time. But his book, it's a chronological story, basically his life memoir of growing up in a small town and then coming to the CIA. And this is an officer who, up until COVID in his 80s, was working at our headquarters building in his late 80s. It's because he loved the mission. He's patriotic. He loves the country. And so he was still coming into the office until his late 80s. And we had to tell him, Tom, you survived Vietnam. You survived being held hostage in Tehran. COVID can't kill you. Like, you are a national treasure. Go home. And so you've got this man who has done all of these amazing things. And this book really shows kind of the best of CIA. He really embodies what we are and who we are. And you get this great story from small town Wisconsin, not thinking your life is going to go that way. You know, you think it's going to go one way, and then one decision, and now you're all over the world on these adventures, meeting your wife overseas, raising a family overseas. And it's just it just really gives you an in-depth look of what it's like to be a CIA officer.
So he sounds like the real life Jack Ryan. Without the...
No offense, John Krasinski, but Tom is cooler.
Okay, so authenticity. And we just heard about your colleague Tom's book, and that's clearly an authentic account of life and work in the CIA. But authenticity does seem to matter quite a bit. And there's a few things that you've worked on or are working on that that keep that front and center for you. Can you comment on that?
Absolutely. So it really comes down to, is it going to be fiction or nonfiction? So our office in the Office of Public Affairs at CIA, if we're going to work with an author or a documentary, if it's about a real person or a real point in history, a real mission, we are going to work really hard to make sure that it's as accurate as possible. So this could look something like if a documentary is being made on the hunt for bin Laden, our office will work with the production team to find them the right officers, both current and formers, who should be interviewed. Now, they may have a list of their own, or when we give them our people, they might not want to use them, and we have to accept that. We have no control over what a final product in Hollywood looks like. But on our end, we want to make sure that they have the right people, and they might not know about them because they work at the CIA. And so we'll go through and we'll talk to these officers and these formers, see if they're interested. And then the next step is working on what we think they're going to be asked in an interview on a documentary so that they can create talking points that then have to go through a classification review. And it's our job as well to be on site or listening in, depending on where they're filming, so that we can help that officer and make sure that they don't say something classified. We also might work with the documentary, in that case, on getting them pictures of our first teams into Afghanistan. You know, a lot of people don't know that CIA actually had the first boots on the ground in Afghanistan 15 days after 9/11. Our story isn't told that much, and so that's an opportunity to give them pictures of our teams on the ground with their Mi-17 helicopter that flew them in. We might have video, we might have documents, we might have maps. And so we'll get those to a documentary filmmaker so that they can incorporate them into their final product. Again, we have no say, but at least we know we tried to give them all of the real deal when it comes to what CIA was doing at this moment in time. Or another example could be, we might be working with a TV show that is going to have multiple episodes about technology created in America in the 20th century, 21st, you know, whatever decade. And we can get them pictures of artifacts, you know, cool technology like the Corona satellite, or we've got this little dragonfly called Insectithopter, which is a pretty much first of its kind UAV that looks like a dragonfly. That was a listening device. So they might be interested in different technology, and we can give them pictures of the artifacts, videos in some case. We have videos of Insectithopter being tested. And then we can also give them links to our FOIA reading room, which allows them to look at all of the declassified documents that go along with these programs. And that way, when they do their show, again, they have really detailed, accurate information. If it's fiction, we still want to help, though. You know, we'll fact check, we'll help them with accuracy, especially if it's something that's fiction but is based on a specific kind of time frame. Mm-hmm. If they're making a show about, you know, counterintelligence during the Cold War, we might have an opportunity to get the producer, or more likely the screenwriter, on the phone to talk to an officer who was, say, like the highest technical officer in Moscow, or a case officer in Moscow, or someone running the analytics side back at headquarters. Get them on the phone, depending on where they are, maybe get them in person at CIA headquarters, have a conversation. Again, everything has to be cleared in advance so that we don't say something classified, but it gives them an opportunity to get a bit of an accurate feel of what it was like to do that job at that specific point in history. So with the fiction, it's a little less scary for me because I don't have to worry about something classified because it's going to be fake. But we still want to help with the fact checking, accuracy. Little details matter, especially to actors. So we also sometimes will have actors come in and they'll get a chance to meet somebody who does the job that they're about to portray. But we're not on Hollywood sets advising. Everything is done from headquarters. It's 2 of us. It's a small team. And it's not like we're, giving them gear that was used in the field for their movie. We don't do any of that. As far as we've ever gone is letting a few things film at our headquarters building. Otherwise, it's just advising.
Who's more starstruck, the CIA officers or the actors?
Usually the actors. A great example of this is we did an event with the Americans TV show, and we had Matthew Rees and we had Kerry Russell and the guy who played the Russian, Costa, and 2 of our formers, the first female case officer to run a high-value asset in Moscow, who was arrested by the KGB and PNG'd from the country, Marty Peterson, and then one of the former heads of the CI, part of that, Mark Kelton. And I thought they were going to be a little starstruck, especially, it's Kerry Russell, right? They had so many questions for our officers. They kept saying, like, you did this for real. And they're like, well, yes, but we didn't murder people like you did on the show all the time.
Right.
We wore wigs, but, let's pause here, and it's just very, very fun to see our officers kind of bring them down to the reality of, you did this on the show, but we didn't do that. But yes, I was arrested and it was really scary. And I took out a KGB guy's hip by, fighting back. But that's about the extent of violence for me. So, yeah, it's usually they're more starstruck by the fact that, wow, that's a real CIA person right there.
Okay, so for all my listeners out there and our listeners out there who are now thinking they want to write a screenplay about the CIA or write the next Jack Ryan novel, what should they do first?
I would say immerse yourself in CIA history. And the best way to do that and get the accurate information is to go on CIA.gov. You can type in museum. You can type in Center for the Studies of Intelligence. You can type in certain keywords if you're interested in Argo or if you're interested in some of the other things I've spoken about today. Women of the OSS, there's some great articles about all of the different women like Betty and Virginia Hall. So that's where I would start, because then you're getting completely accurate information from the source, and you can get inspired by these amazing people, the technology we've created. There's a lot on the A-12, which was the fastest, highest plane ever created at the time. So you can get into the technology side, the people side. There's a lot of things to be inspired by on our website.
All right. Well, Janelle, thank you very much for joining us on Rendezvous with History, and hopefully
thank you for having me.
People will be inspired by the CIA and watching the movies and reading the spy novels and whatnot. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Rendezvous with History is a podcast produced by the Ronald Reagan Institute's Scholarly Initiatives. You can learn more at ronaldreaganinstitute.org and follow along on social media at Reagan Institute.